I'm Joe Harvey. Today I'll talk about project definition or scoping in the Six Sigma DMAIC methodology. It's in chapter 7 in the book, the second half, 7.5. Viewing this video after viewing the airport video, which defines processes, is a good natural follow-through. In this video, I will cover in particular the following notions. Concepts, project scoping, problem statement, process mission, efficiency and effectiveness, two fundamental notions whenever you're talking about operations. Technical level, the SITOC, the FAST diagram, the SMART problem statement in particular, big Y, small y, efficiency, effectiveness diagram, and influence diagram. And I will, to illustrate this best, I'll use a case study, which is fictitious, but it will illustrate very well the concepts and techniques I'd like to explain today. The fictitious case I called Cloud Computing Inc., or CCI. And here is the fictitious context. Who are we? We're a small company offering IT solutions for small businesses. Our areas of excellence are accounting and finance. We're small, 70 people, of which 20 professionals, 30 technicians, and 20 administration and clerical workers. Half of our workload come from competitive bidding. The rest is repeat work. 90% of our profits come from the repeat work. An important variable. We have different problem. 25% on-time delivery only. This impacts our cash flow, our profits, our follow-up work, our productivity because of planning changes. Our winning rate is 20%, but we know for a fact that the industry leader hits 40%. Only 25% of the work we get is repeat work. We've got to double that if we want to survive. We lose money on 30% of the jobs we get. It should be a rare occurrence, like 10%, unless we really have a very strong prospect of making money afterwards. About half the jobs we bid are within our area of expertise. We should shoot for 90% within the framework of a year or two for that to happen. A venture capital firm has bought into our stock, and they insist on our getting our act together pretty fast. Here's an organization with a lot of pressure to get results quickly. A big risk here is to start too many things at the same time and not to get anything done, to create more confusion than solutions. Some formalization will be useful. We need to get our best people together, those who know the business from its various angles, and use a common language in order to zoom in on the best opportunities we have, make it as focused as possible, mobilize a team, fix it, get our confidence level up, move on to the next opportunity. So let's start formalizing the problem. Our major goal is to improve profits, obviously. That's a variable. It's a quantity. It can increase or decrease. It is related to other variables in the business. And this is where we need our managers to come and tell us what are the major variables and what are their relationships. Profit goes at the center. It is the big Y. Around it, we identify critical variables that impact profit, and in the process, impact each other. Let's look at these variables now. Percentage of bids in our target segment, as previously mentioned, obviously an important variable. Average utilization rate and percentage of actual profit on jobs we bid. Percentage win, forward workload, number of bids submitted. Obviously, all these variables impact profits, and they impact each other. We will point out the most important correlations between these variables. A green line will represent a positive correlation between variable A and B. They move together. A goes up, B goes up, A goes down, B goes down. I'll use a red line for an inverse correlation, meaning that when A goes up, B goes down, and vice versa. Look, let's look first at the green lines. The higher our productivity, the higher our profits. The higher the percentage of bid in our target segment, the more frequently we win, because that's what we know best. We excel at this. The greater the percentage profit on jobs we bid, the greater the profit. And then when we utilize our people very well, of course, those two things will multiply to generate more profit. Let's look, those are all positive correlation. Let's look at negative correlation now with the red lines. For example, the greater the number of days late, the lesser the percentage of win. We're overloaded. The greater the percentage markup we apply, the less we win, of course. Look at the combinations between these variables. The greater the forward workload, the later we are. The later we are, the more we change our schedule around, and we lose on productivity. And because we decrease productivity, we decrease profits as well. You've got loops of all kinds here. And of course, what I just said is not obvious. It depends on the context. A group of managers, each from different functional area, will have a stimulating discussion. If we create the right context, if we have the right people and the right leadership. You don't want a yes person in this exercise. You want a frank discussion, and then you'd like to know, where's your data? Big Y, and let's say that we pick as a small y. These are all small y's, potential small y's, but let's say that the average number of days late appears to be a critical variable that's really at the center of the knot that we are trying to disentangle. Let's get the facts. Let's get data on it. Variation. This is called an individual and moving range chart, where you see variation in the number of days late over time. Of course, we have to ensure that we measure that correctly. If we don't, we got to develop a new measurement system and validate it for repeatability, reproducibility, and then get data. And then try to make sense out of that data. If this were an abacus with lines like this, and you were to put it vertical, all the balls would fall down and you would get a distribution like this. And let's say in this case that on average we're 35 days late. Average are interesting. Variation around the average, clusters, dispersion is extremely important as well. I will get to that in a later video. We're now in a position to formulate a SMART statement. Right now we're at 35 days late. We gotta bring it down to 4 days late. This is specific enough. It is certainly measurable once we have developed a measurement system. It's got to be achievable. And we got to be able to demonstrate to the team that it is. If people don't buy it, they will go through the motions, will never believe it can be done, and therefore will never do it. It's got to be a relevant variable. We have just shown that it is. And if top management get together, bringing instances where this variable played a crucial role in convincing people. This is really change management. It's sales. You got to convince people that it makes sense. And finally, time bound. Set a time frame to achieve the results. So now we have a clear focus for our project. It is one variable that we can measure. We know where we are. We know where we have to be. We'll be able to measure progress and eventually success. What variables are closely related to this variable that could help us scope the process that has to be fixed? We will again use the influence diagram that I showed earlier. This time, though, at a much lower level, using the Google Earth analogy, zooming in from 5,000 meters to 1,000 meters, you'll now see all sorts of other variables. Days late in delivery has a critical impact on profit. These other variables are generated by brainstorming, using a team now that is much closer to the action than the previous team that was looking at a complete business. And the question they're asked is, what variables impact the number of days late in delivery? Through brainstorming and using the fabulous technology of sticky notes, we generate these variables, and again we correlate them. I don't have the color code that I had previously. A minus sign is an inverse correlation, a plus sign is a positive correlation, and we've generated about 10, 12 variables here. The number of last-minute problems encountered will have an impact on the amount of over budget that we get at the end, and will have, of course, a direct impact on the number of days late in delivery. The average number of years of experience of the core team obviously will have an impact on meeting the budget or no. Number of staff changes during the project will impact the time from notice to proceed, NTP, notice to proceed, till the first prototype is built. And this in turn will have an impact on the number of last minute problems encountered, and so on. So you've got all sorts of cycles here. And a last one here. Days after NTP, core team holds the first meeting. Well, the quicker it is formed, the quicker it'll hold the first meeting. Number of core team members who were part of the bid team. If they're the same people, of course, they're right on board. They can move in directly into project mode from scoping mode. So here is a knot of interaction that a team put together. This is really a projection of the mental mindset of people, their mental model of what goes on in the business. Depending on their functional perspective and experience, they will have different point of view, different mental model. This is a confrontation. And when debate occurs that cannot be resolved, let's get the facts. It is a worthwhile topic to get clear with facts. This diagram should lead us to the identification of the processes that has the biggest potential to solve the problem. You see, we all have quantities here, variables. We don't have any process. A process is defined, as discussed in the previous video on airport, by an action verb, infinitive. So the question we ask ourselves now, what are the processes that we do that impact these variables? Recalling that a process is a shared way of doing things, that it is described by an action verb, a repetitive action verb, something that we perform regularly. Let's ask ourselves now, what is it that we do repetitively that has an impact on those variables? Brainstorming, generate these and capture them on sticky notes again. Always describe it starting with an action verb. For example, prepare bid, put bid team together, manage customer relationship, develop rough cut project schedule, develop control plan, manage risks. Those are all processes. Whether they're formalized or not, it is done repetitively in this business. Some of these processes are related to one another. Manage risk, assess initial risk, develop risk management plan are three parts, of course, of the same risk management process. Develop the scheduling process here, putting the core team together. Those are all repetitive actions that will definitely impact the variables that we had earlier. The next thing then is to connect the two elements, the influence diagram with the processes. And with the number of arrows, when you select suppliers, you have an impact on the number of last-minute problems encountered. If you've selected poor suppliers, you will pay the price. Manage customer relationship will have an impact on the amount of over budget. Up selected team members will have an impact on the days after NTP when the team is put together, and so on. Recapitulating. We started with profit as a big variable, big Y. We picked number of days late in delivery as a critical variable that impact profit. We took that variable and looked at all the other variables related to it. And now we're listing the processes that impact the variables that we need to change. Some of these then, and hopefully one of these in particular, will have the biggest impact, the biggest leverage, and that's the one we would like to scope for improvement. Make sure we start working on something important. Let's assume that 3 processes are really salient here and that the team agrees that the way you assess initial risk, you address customer change requests, and you prepare the bid are 3 processes where there's a lot of leverage if we can succeed in improving them. Not only do we want to pick processes with much leverage, we'd like processes that have room for improvement, processes that are ineffective, that doesn't deliver the goods, produce the desired result, and processes that are inefficient. They do deliver the good eventually, but it costs you an eye. This is where the E&E diagram comes in. Efficiency effectiveness diagram shows effectiveness at the bottom. Very effective. Outputs exceed most customer requirement. Down to level 1 here, very ineffective. Outputs do not meet customer requirements with a gradation in between. Here you've got efficiency. Top level process is defect free, has low unit cost, the shortest cycle time, and no waste. Down to the worst possible value, process is plagued with defects, waste, and long, unpredictable cycle time. Of course, world class is when you're both very effective and very efficient. And the sick process right here is where you're both. You don't deliver the goods and it costs you an eye anyway. What you do here is you take the processes identified in the outer circle in the influence diagram on the previous slide and you rate them. The same team of experts who knows these processes very well will get together, again using the sticky notes and then debating, is this process effective? How can you demonstrate that? Where's your data? Is this process efficient? Where's the cost data that shows it? And you position in this diagram the processes identified earlier. The closer you are to being world class, of course, the less potential for improvement you have. And even though a process may have much leverage, if it is world class, that's not the one you want to pick for improvement. So you look in this area. Looking at the correlation between the PRAS diagram and this one, of course, we see that prepare bid really has much leverage and is very bad, therefore great potential for improvement and is a good candidate for an improvement project. I will now present the SciTalk tool, the FAST diagram, and the process mission. The SciTalk, supplier, input, transformation, output, customer. S, supplier, I, input, T, transformation, O, output, C, customer. We define the perimeter of a process that way, starting from the C, or the customer. Negotiate contract, perform the work, are downstream processes. There are action verbs, and the output of our process go to them. Once you've got a winning bid, of course, you've got to perform the work. So this output of that process is the input to the next one. Also, the client and the shareholders are customers of this process. They have a lot riding on its outcome. What do we give the client? Well, a no-bid decision or a proposal if we do decide to bid. What do we start with? Request for quotes, request for proposal. Who gives it to us? The supplier, the potential client. How do we make a RFQ into an output? Well, by deciding to bid or not and preparing the proposal. When does it start? When does it end? Starts when RFQ is identified, ends when the no bid decision is made or a client awards the contract. In between those 2 points, you have the cycle, the process cycle. And the cycle time, of course, is the time that elapses between these 2 moments in the process. Why does the process exist? What is its raison d'être? That's quite fundamental. Before you change it, it's good to know what it's for. In this case, to ensure that the company's productive resources are profitably engaged in work that is likely to generate the maximum reward over the long term, through selecting the right jobs, preparing a technically and commercially superior proposal, and optimizing the risk-profit trade-off. It is worthwhile to take the time to do this right. Wordsmithing, in this case, is worthwhile. Otherwise, confusion persists. People have different understanding of the nature of the process and its raison d'être. Therefore, they cannot agree on the detail of how it should be performed. This is a step that is often missed. It takes time. But whenever you disagree, realize that there is value added in coming to terms, so that the people who do the work will understand what they're trying to achieve. This is the SITOC diagram. It is a starting point, and yet it requires a very good understanding of what comes downstream. So it is not an easy thing to do just right. Bear with us at this point as you go through the sequence of tools and methodologies that come with it. With experience, you'll come to understand the importance and the triggers to do that just right. What we have right now is a couple of verbs. Where do they fit in the process architecture of the business? Bid is a process, but it is connected to other processes in the business. We call these adjacent processes. Downstream, schedule the workforce, perform the work. Upstream, scan the competitive environment, advertise and promote. And in parallel, maintain the knowledge base, the cost database that the bid will be using. Identifying adjacent processes is vital because it will allow you to bring into the team critical persons, critical resources. And if you don't, then when you try and change this, you'll have to adjust these processes and you will get a lot of resistance, of course, legitimate resistance to change. If we're not involved and you people tell us that we should change our process, I mean, in Canadian terms, you're shoveling your snow into our backyard. So make sure you identify adjacent processes, and for team selection purposes, pick the right people. The next tool is the functional analysis, already presented in the airport example. It is a logical and functional breakdown of this process. Prepare bid. How? Perform preliminary assessment. Evaluate current and forward workload. Assess strategic fit, and so on. You ask yourself the question, how? You verify it with the questions, why? And you try and follow, whenever possible, a time frame, a time thread here that will make sure that you don't forget anything. Doing a fast diagram, you're using your head, your logic. A fast diagram of a bidding process should be universal and generic. It should apply to any organization that does bidding. It is not a process mapping, which I will just illustrate for the sake of showing the contrast here. A process mapping describes what actually goes on. Whereas you use your brain and your logic to prepare a normative fast, what should go on, what must go on, when you do a mapping, you leave your brain outside and you're a camera. You look, you observe, you don't judge, you note, this is what goes on. He or she does that, it goes here, it goes there, and you depict the flow of the process. Read, assess, recommend, then it goes to a detailed assessment. If it's okay, then you decline or you bid. Then you prepare the schedule goes to finance prepare a budget, and so on. And then you also describe and how long does it take. Then you get average time duration, and you not only get averages, you get variations around this average, the topic of a forthcoming video as well. And you get capacity. How many units can we produce per week? This allows you to identify bottleneck and waste. As we know from theory of constraints, an hour gain at a non-bottleneck activity is a mirage. An hour gained at a bottleneck activity is an hour gain for the complete system. So having an accurate representation of the process flow, the value stream, is an essential input for what will follow in the improvement phase. In the definition phase, we will not need it. We are just scoping the process. Here we are starting to measure and describe in more detail the process. The FAST diagram, of course, can be broken down further. Each of these sub-process or functionalities, assess, strategic fit, is a sub-process. Therefore, can be the object of a SciTalk. It's got a perimeter. It's got inputs and outputs as well. It can be the object of a FAST diagram. And it can be the object of a separate mission statement. The mission of the bid process is spread out. It gives missions to all these sub-processes which together perform this mission. For example, assess strategic fit. Why do we do that? What's the raison d'etre of that? To establish the extent to which this job fits well with the company's distinctive competence and can thus contribute to further develop core competencies and knowledge, reputation, and profitability. Now that this is my statement, of course, what you can assume it would trigger a fair amount of debate in any organization. Set a price in line with the desirability of the job, both over the long and the short term. The number and strength of the competition, the risks involved, and the probability of securing further work from this client in the future. Avoid greed and fear. Only take calculated bets that the company can afford to lose. I've done this for two. You could do that for each of these specific functionalities. This is extremely useful when time comes to either design a way to do this, pick a way to do this, or assess the actual way used to do that. At this point, the define phase is essentially done. All that remains to be completed is see if you can pare down some functionalities in the FAST diagram. Those that seem to offer low prospect for resolving the issue, while adding a lot of time and effort to the analysis. In other words, they're red herring, and if you can eliminate those, you will allow the team to spend more time on the processes or sub-processes with big potential and analyze them in more detail. You're now ready to select a process owner, formulate a process change mandate, and put a team together. And those are the topic of a forthcoming video. I hope this has clarified some of the notions, and the forthcoming video on variation and a forthcoming video on actual process measurement will give you the next steps to follow from then on. Thank you.